Hey, what's up? I'm Butterfly to Light, and I am back with spiritual awakenings. And I want to talk about spiritual awakenings and some of the symptoms as well as experiences go through when dealing with spiritual awakenings. Okay, so the information I'm going to give is not in any particular order. However, I did try to organize it as such. Is not really in any particular order when you're dealing with the symptoms, because it just depends on the individual and what they are experiencing and what they're recognizing that they are experiencing at the time. Okay, so most times when going through spiritual awakenings, a lot of people find themselves questioning life. Now, I get it, because a lot of people feel like at certain points in their lives, they get to a place where they start questioning life, like their life, where they're at, where they came from, where they're going to. And yes, this can be a form of awakening as well. The only thing awakening really is awareness. So becoming aware of something that could have been there all along, but you're just now coming aware of, is also associated with awakening. Okay, so while questioning life is normal, a lot of times when going through spiritual awakenings, the questioning of life is beyond what is considered normal. Notice I said considered normal, because let's face it, in this world, people do things all the time, and they, under the guise of it's what's normal. Okay, and they base every aspect of their lives on the back of what is normal, most of the time socially normal. So anything outside of those social norms can affect us in a tremendous way, a tremendous scale. And this can also affect our relationships, our families, our jobs, any place that we're at in the world that used to mean something of value to us. Now we find ourselves questioning it. Working with people, I found out that a lot of people come to me, that I talk with, always know on an inner level. It's not something to where we're talking about revelations they've had and they're not quite sure of what it is. There's always a deep inner knowing that what they have been taught or they've been associating themselves with, how they seen life, is really not that. The question is more about guilt. Not understanding why parents, society, and others don't understand the truth or won't listen to them. Not understanding why they were lied to. Okay, because I feel like we can argue and go back and forth on what the truth is about something, when, where, and how. But something that we cannot really ignore is our own inner understanding. And I'm not talking about those people that get those understandings and those inklings, but they choose to be in denial. I'm talking about those people that really decide, like, this is what I know to be true, and this is what's resonating within me. Therefore, I want to live accordingly to that. Now, that barely comes without some type of questioning. What is life really all about? And I promise you that all you got to do is allow yourself, like, open yourself up to what that is. All you need is the question. That's all you need. I know a lot of people that are afraid of questions. They're afraid of even being questioned. But all you need is the question, because the question is the spark that leads you on your trail. If you go through life, we go through life without really ever questioning anything, how do you know what is real and unreal? Like, do we just sit around and believe everything that was taught to us or told to us? It's natural, it's normal. Our parents and their parents before them, although they can be wise about life and life experiences, they don't know everything. Okay. So it's no need to hold on to guilt or place blame. Now you're finding yourself or awakening to your own life experience. Questioning life is a part of it. A tip that I can give about that is ask the question. Start asking the questions, even if you're talking to yourself and you're getting dressed in the morning. Ask, okay, so if I'm feeling this way, why am I feeling this way? Like, what do I need to know? And don't be afraid of what answers may come, because answers, they come. They show up in different signs. They show up in different synchronicities. They show up in different ways. A complete stranger can come and give you an answer to a question that you asked, and you're going to know that you asked the question already. It's a spiritual thing. It's a higher form of ourselves, and that is why we call it spiritual awakenings. Okay, so questioning life is very normal, or something that we experience often with dealing with spiritual awakenings. People also find themselves withdrawing or isolating themselves. Yes, from others, from society, from family, from old friends, even things that they used to do. There's a large amount of time spent alone. And although it can be heartbreaking, it can be very emotional dealing with this stuff, you find that over time, through studying and learning, you heal from the past. You heal from guilt, from shame, and anything associated to what you had no control over in the past. And you're finding yourself now dealing with the here and now. And the withdrawing and isolation can also definitely be about obtaining new information, more information. People may wonder why you're not trying to hang out or why you're not doing the things you used to do. And you could just simply be so into what you're awakening to. Now, I must also add, guys, that there are different levels of awakening. So there's no judgment. We have some people awakening to the fact that there's information about true history. Okay? Columbus didn't really discover America first. We have people awakening to that. We have some people awakening to the fact that a lot of stuff that how they did things before in the past, because it was a family tradition or was something that was expected of them to do, they're finding out like, okay, that doesn't fit me and who I am, and they're awakening to that information. And you know, guys, I always say this, a person that wants to know like what is really true for them and what it is that they're awakening to, if it's a trick or if it's a not, I feel like this, if it makes your life better and you see how it's influenced you for the better, it puts you on your truth path where you can now live out your true passions and desires, and it's done in a healthy way, you are on the right road. You are on the right road. Okay? So you're studying and you're learning, and withdrawing and isolation comes with that. I feel like it's a normal part of the experience, but if you are a person that feels like you cannot cope with the experiences alone, people like me, other spiritual advisors, counselors, I know a lot of psychologists and therapists that are willing to hear, be open, listen, to understand different situations and experiences a person is going through, regardless of what level it's on. And I also know a lot of practicing therapists that also understand spiritual awakenings, things of that sort, because it kind of goes to the intuitiveness and the understanding of a higher form, a higher level of understanding everything that we as people go through, the unseen, the unknown. You know, they are well aware of that. So it's no judgments on how you go about here having that listening ear. My thing is this: finding people that have experienced a similar situation is good. Sometimes the people that's right around us, like our friends and family and stuff, they cannot help us, because the only thing they're going to do is tell you you're crazy or you're evil or you're demonic or you all these things, or dismiss what you're saying. They could sometimes they're not even in tune with what you're saying. Like, they cannot resonate with it because they themselves are not there. That does not mean that you call yourself crazy and, you know, go off the deep end. And this is serious, guys. Like, I know a lot of people right now that are experience this type of experience awakenings, and they end up on drugs, alcohol, anything, coping mechanisms, anything that they can use to cope with to get themselves out of dealing with the type of growth and the process of spiritual awakenings. Because imagine, you know, before like this time that we're in now, where you can just get online and you can Google something and then you find help that you need and other people that have been through like and similar experiences. A lot of times, like in the past, that wasn't happening. You had to deal with the people in your direct surroundings, and you had to deal with being outcast and talked about and belittled and all these things. And instead of talking to people about it, a lot of people went within themselves, amongst themselves, to deal with it. They will overindulge in activities that was not healthy for them. You know, like I said, alcoholism, drugs, sex, addictions of any sort, to not have to deal with what they are currently or presently going through, to not have to feel it, because it can be a very painful process. Like, once you open up to the fact, like, okay, yeah, this is really happening. Like, you know, I'm changing things. The world isn't what I thought it was. And I think that on a certain level, everybody knows that the world isn't what they thought it was or they think it is. But it's just different when you're going through a spiritual awakening. And it can be very painful because the body is going through a process of shedding. Okay, it's shedding itself. And it's usually shedding itself from the emotional body, because the belief systems that we attach ourselves to really are not necessarily logical at all. They don't have to make a sense at all, but it's something that you've attached yourself. We've attached ourselves to these things. And shedding the emotional body is painful. And just because we shed the emotional body, it doesn't mean that we get rid of our emotions altogether. We get rid of certain attachments that we outgrow. And I'll be talking about this in later videos. Okay. Another thing that people experience associated to spiritual awakenings, which is I kind of covered a little bit, but I want to go deeper into, is sadness and depression. Yes, spiritual awakenings can lead to sadness and depression, loneliness, and misunderstandings, because the misunderstandings can come in when family and friends and your lover, like the person you're in a love relationship with, just feels like they cannot understand where you're coming from. And you don't really want to risk feeling crazy or judged, so you just hold everything in. And the sadness can come from the shedding of the emotional body. Like I said, the emotional body is very physical. It's what binds us to our physical reality. Because without that, we're dealing with the mind. The mind bringing the way of bringing new things in. And yes, people can lose their minds as well, but that's a whole nother subject. You know, the point of the matter is that the sadness and the emotions of it all comes because it is hard to let go of certain previous attachments. Okay? The isolation, withdrawing, being misunderstood can make a person feel lonely, and they can easily become depressed. Now, here's a slight difference, because when we talk about spiritual awakenings, and I've already mentioned psychologists, therapists, counselors, and people of that and such. However, where you have to be careful when you're dealing with spiritual awakenings is this. Yes, sometimes therapists, they don't really understand spiritual awakenings, because as a psychologist myself, everything is pretty much based towards scientific facts, scientific proof. Okay, so a therapist may be want to go more along the lines of diagnosing the person with something, like diagnosing the individual with something. Whereas the individual just needs someone that understands this process that they're going through, okay? And helping them move through the process, okay? So if you are going to see a therapist or a counselor, or anybody of the such, make sure that they're also experienced with, or they understand the other aspects to human existence, the spiritual form as well, okay? Or if not, what's good is like spiritual counselors, spiritual advisors, people of that in that area. Because no, they're not looking to diagnose you, but they can help guide you through the process. A person that's going through a spiritual awakening, they're not going through necessarily anything mental as far as having a mental disorder or a behavior disorder. They're going through an experience that's allowing them to elevate their human identity and let go of what's no longer needed, because we're in a time to where we're going through changes. It doesn't matter. These changes, see, this is what I want to get people to understand. This is why I start talking about this more, is that changes, okay, because we got to deal with universal law when we're dealing with these type of things. We're dealing with universal law. We're dealing with movements of the planets, time, where we were before, where we are now, and really nothing stays the same is what I want people to understand. So we're not dealing with the belief system here. Okay. Believe it or not. Have you ever seen those things? It's like this in life. There are things that's going to happen, whether we believe it's going to happen or not. Like rain. Rain is going to happen, no, regardless of if a person believes it's not going to happen. You know, let's take it never rains in Southern California. And it does, because I've been there and I've happened to be there 3 days straight when it rained. And you know, every single time the Californians said, you know, it doesn't usually do this, but it was indeed raining. And this is my point. Okay. Some things we as humans, okay, in our mind, the capacity that our mind is able to go to. For some of us, it depends on who we are, what we came here to do. Okay, we have certain human beings that are higher life forms. And they come here to the world and everything is just is boring, it's simple minded to them. They can't cope with it and they get into other stuff. You know, they get into negative behaviors and abnormal behaviors and all this and all that. But still, the point of the matter is this right here. All of this stuff takes place whether people believe it takes place or not. It doesn't require a belief. And I think this is where a lot of people go wrong when they are trying to understand spiritual aspects of ourselves, of human nature. They keep trying to tie it to this belief system that you cannot tie it to. So one thing we have to understand is that universal law will happen. Okay, it's no really getting out of it. So knowing this, you have to adjust yourself to what is going on that level alone. And we are going through a significant amount of changes. These changes doesn't need an explanation. It doesn't have to warn you that first before going through it. It doesn't. Because your mind probably wouldn't let you. Okay. Your feelings, your emotions probably wouldn't let you. If you had to volunteer or make the choice of, okay, this is what I'm going to experience because I want to experience it. No. It doesn't happen that way. So understanding that things are just going to happen that's beyond our control in the sense of how we want to associate it to the world, to society that we live in alone is very important when associating or when trying to understand what you may be going through on a higher spiritual level, on a higher level period. Okay. It's hard to conceive. So going through these different times, being in another place, having things happen, having change take place on a higher level has nothing to do with whether you believe it or not. This is what catches a lot of people off guard. It has nothing to do with whether you believe it's going to happen or not. Like I said, it raining in California for the 3 days that I was there had nothing to do with whether the people believed that it was going to happen or not. It did. It happened. Okay? So you have to get that straight. It's not about, yes, belief in what we believe is important, but there are those set things that's in place that happen regardless of whether we believe or what we know or are aware of at the time. It doesn't stop things from happening. Okay? And this is why I say that people, it helps talking to people that are familiar with these processes. Because sometimes, you know, when we go to learn about how the brain works, how the body works and everything. Well, period. They don't teach us about the other aspects. They teach about everything that can be proven. Okay. They don't teach about the aspects of ourselves that are, they consider can't be proven, even though I myself and other metaphysics, astrologists, intuitives, we can explain it very well. It all can be proven, but you know, that's a whole nother story. It's not about proving it. It's about understanding what you could be going through. Okay. So yes, depression can happen, and I would not say keep it all to yourself. You need somebody that you can probably talk to or vent to, and it's probably going to be outside of your social circle. And a good way to find those people is to question, like, okay, well, where can I go find help? Where can I find somebody that can understand me? It's better to do that than to go and dive off into alcohol and drugs, overindulgence and sex. Like, the consequences may not be worth it. You get what I'm saying? And you don't want to set yourself back. It's really not about blame. It's just really about understanding and having the information that you can use or utilize. Okay? And a lot of people, like, once they start going through spiritual awakenings, they start wanting to share. They start wanting to share with others information that they've learned about. Because once they start getting into isolation and learning and becoming open to things and new experiences and experiences sometimes that are not, they're like spiritual experiences, like things you cannot really explain. Like, the thing that they want to automatically do is go share with other people. And let me tell you, like I said, yes, you can share with other people, but the moment you start hearing them doubt you or tell you that you're crazy and everything, don't waste your time. Because most often than not, a person that hasn't experienced something is going to tell you that you're crazy because they don't understand it, because it's not in their norm. We're not going to let them call you abnormal or tell you that you're crazy and all these things. And especially if you're a person that is a functioning person, okay? You know that you're putting two legs and two pant. You know that you're putting your two legs and your two pant legs. You know that you're fixing and eating breakfast. It's like you're able to exist fully. You're fully aware of what's happening day to day, but you are just going through an experience, a interpersonal experience, and because that you can't really expect or require people to know. Okay. However, spiritual awakenings often point us to the truth about things, and people that have not experienced this and they don't know and they don't understand what that is and it's unusual to them, yes, they will tell you things like you're crazy, you need to go get help, they don't know what you're talking about. You will start to find yourself drifting away from these people, and my whole point is, let them go. Like, let yourself drift away from them. It doesn't mean that you have to X them out of your life forever. Some people you might have to, because you just kind of birds of a feather flock together. So some people you might have to. Sometimes you outgrow a relationship with somebody else and finding yourself wanting to leave, wanting to get out of it. You don't even really look at relationships the same. Okay, let's just put it this way. You realize that most physical stuff that we attach ourselves to is not based in I want to say reality so bad. It's not what you thought it was. It's not what you thought it was previously before awakening. Okay? So, what is good is different platforms. Okay? I love the internet because we're able to meet up with so many different people, and it doesn't have to be negative at all. And share our experiences. And there's others that want to learn, you know, and that can understand where you're coming from. And this will make you feel like a real sort of support that you feel like you cannot get regularly. And a lot of times it also lets you know, like, okay, you know what? I'm not just crazy. It's not just me. I'm not just experiencing this by myself, because there's others that's experiencing the same thing. Okay. And the biggest aspect to spiritual awakenings, and I'm telling you, I'm gonna be talking way more about this, is fear. Yes. And, you know, it took me a while to come to terms with what fear was, what it meant to me. Because I feel like a healthy dose of fear is natural, is normal. Because it's like when you're teaching your kids, don't go across the street without looking. Because you will get hit by a car. You want them to fear that you might get hit by a car because of what is true. You might get hit by a car. But then there's those other fears that people experience that's really not based off of anything that can happen to them. And if it did happen, it's not gonna be negative towards them, bad towards them. It's just like a series of thought processes and feelings that people go through, and they work up a situation to be worse than what it originally was, or what it ends up being. Like, I have a story about myself. You know, back in my days when I used to go to a lot of theme parks in Germany, travel around, going to different theme parks, I used to love getting on the roller coasters, you know. And it was this one roller coaster in particular, like on the way through the line, on the way to get on a ride, the whole way up, I was so fearful. I'm like, oh my gosh, the way that it looks, what if I fall? All these things, even though something could happen like that, you know. However, when I got on the ride, it wasn't even about me falling. The roller coaster was not scary. But I couldn't help but thinking, like, after I getting off, I'm like, why was I scared? Like, I realized, like, I just talked myself into being scared when it wasn't even scary. Like, something mechanically happening to the roller coaster wasn't even my thought. You get what I'm saying? Like, it was the fact that the ride itself was not scary. It was rather weak. But it was an example of how fear can completely take us over. And we often associate fear with what? The unknown. I was afraid of what that roller coaster may do because I didn't know what it could do until after I went through it. It's the same with spiritual awakenings. Like, a lot of people find themselves fearful in the moment of spiritual awakenings, or fearful going through the process. And then once they get used to it, once they get through it, once they start working through their own issues, because that's what spiritual awakenings will do. It'll wake you up to some things. You'll blame, you'll point your fingers, you'll say it's other people's fault, until you finally come to the realization, like, no, this is about me. Something that a lot of us are not really usually dealing with, because we're so used to making everything about somebody else accommodating our needs, our personal needs, our emotional needs. Yes, a lot of us blame children for being immature, but there's a lot of adults out there that is extremely immature, and they need validation of all forms on all levels. Okay, so the spiritual awakenings is fearful a lot of times, because people, what is more fearful to people than roller coasters? Okay, they're crossing the streets and getting hit by cars more than themselves. They're facing up to their own weaknesses. failures, identity even. So it's really, the spiritual awakening is about exploration of the self in so many ways and readjusting that self to the world, inside of the world, seeing things completely different and growing in the process. But fear comes with spiritual awakenings because it's unknown information. It's aspects of ourselves we're not familiar with. It usually comes with some form of spiritual enlightenment and phenomena. Like, for example, things happening that you couldn't have, there's no way possible logically that you think on the level that you're thinking it would happen, that is happening. Therefore, fear arises. And I say that some tips on dealing with fear is understanding, like assessing it. Is this something I truly should be fearful about, or is it not? Is it putting me into any immediate danger? And understanding that the whole part of it is because the information, the new part, or exploring parts of yourself is new. It's unfamiliar, therefore unknown. And the unknown is a good place to breed fear. Yes, questioning life, withdrawing and isolation, sadness and depression, wanting to share information with others, and fear are all natural parts of the spiritual awakening process. All right. So I'm your girl Butterfly to Light. You can email me with any questions that you have. And yeah, I shall return.